read an article by one Alex Johnson explaining why the Bulls should trade Coby White. And while this is sentiments that I've heard from other Bulls fans, today I'm going to completely debunk the narrative on the Bulls trading Coby White and why it just doesn't make sense for where the Bulls are right now or really in the future, considering a few factors. Plus, we're going to look at Matas Buxzelis and his summer league and ask the question of what should his role be to start off his rookie career with the Chicago Bulls next season. And lastly, we're going to look at Julian Phillips as well as ready to join that youth movement and overall being excited about it. We're going to talk about all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content. I'm really excited to talk about this, not only because it lets me get in my kind of bag, right, but because when it comes down to changes, right, and every fan of sports team has a different outlook in the direction that they want their team to go. There's an article I read on Pimpin' Ain't Easy by Alex Johnson, and he brought up that the Bulls should be trading Coby White, that the Bulls would be crazy basically to not trade Coby White right now. And I want to go through some of the thought process, because there are, even though I don't agree with the thought process on it, there are some well thought out things in here considering and taking where the Bulls are at right now. Mainly, he pointed out on why the main reason why the Chicago Bulls should look to move on from Coby White is that Coby White could have, as a player that's 24 years old, that still is still uncovering and developing a lot of his skills, that he could net you back a lot of picks. And that's not really a bad mindset. I do think that if the Bulls were to make Coby White available, they would demand a bunch of picks back for a player that's young on a really good deal. Those type of things all play a factor into that. And that's not something that I can't deny. But one of the things that they point out in this article, and where it started I started dissecting this article a little bit more is they mentioned the fact that if they don't see Coby White as a franchise-altering player, they should move on from him. And you guys have known, that's not a mindset that I carry. Now, there's a couple of reasons why, and I'll lay that out, and then I'll go into kind of the details, contracts, things like that. Now, is Coby White a player that can lead your franchise to a Eastern Conference Finals? No, nobody would say that we've seen enough of Coby White to even say that yet. But to say that we should then move off from him just because of that, you guys know I always look at the Kirk Hinrich, Ben Gordon, Luol Deng, that Bulls era. They developed really good players there that were solid role players. And then by the time they found their superstar in Derrick Rose, they got lucky, right? They had a team that had a solid basis, and you just needed to add a couple of things onto that. They added Carlos Boozer. Over that time, they went out and got Paul Gasol at times as well. But then you had players develop like Taj Gibson, who turned into a starter for that team. But most of that team, the biggest parts of that team, the pillars of that team, really players that were homegrown that we developed. And that is the point of drafting well and building over time. And the thought process that we should move on from Coby because he may not be this franchise-changing talent when it comes down to it, I get it. Most players aren't franchise-changing talents, but you still need players like Coby White around. And so because of that, right, the mindset that Alex Johnson has in this article is kind of more one on a team that's tanking. And we know now that the Bulls are not a tanking team. That is something that should be clear. They are still a team that's trying to compete. And even if you are in the mindset of we could get so many draft picks back for Coby White, which still even then, what are you getting? Maybe a couple of firsts, if that, right? And that's if the team really looks at Coby and says, no, this is the guy, right? But it's not necessarily going to change things. His growth is not done growing yet. And the fact of the matter is, it seems like a lot of people have this mindset that you need to move on from Coby before he gets his contract extension because he's going to make a whole bunch of money. And that's the part that I really want to spend some time debunking when it comes down to it. Nobody can debunk that the Bulls don't have a lot of valuable assets that are looked that way out by the general NBA. Nobody can deny that. And it would get draft capital to trade back Coby, but the thought process of looking at the contract, that's honestly not a good way to look at it. Coby White's contract right now is a little over $12 million. And the way that contract extensions work, your salary with your extension can start off at 140% of the last year of your deal. And looking at that, that will put, even if Coby White gets the max on his next possible deal, The max that his contract can start off with is at $17.92 million. That is the max. Now you can qualify for, I think, 150% if you win an MVP or something like that. And unless Coby White does something like, even then though, you're still looking at probably a $20 million contract for a player that can get you 20 points per game. In a league where the contracts are getting to the point to where $30, $40 million contracts are starting to become where role players are getting paid, Coby White has the type of deal that again, his max starting off at 17.92%. And even if you look at the 5% annual increases off of that year, you're still looking at a contract that's sub $20 million based off what max he qualifies for right now. And so the thought process of trading Coby White, who will be a cost because the Bulls were able to lock him in. It's one of the best deals that AK has made, is signing Coby White to a $12 million contract extension. The fact of the matter is that because they did that, it makes Coby White's contract, basically, it's going to be a cost-effective contract. Even if you max him out every single time, it's going to make that throughout basically the rest of his career. For comparison, Coby White's second contract, or his third contract, would be less than the second contract Zach LaVine signed. When Zach LaVine signed his initial extension, the offer sheet that he got from the Sacramento Kings, he was making an average annual salary of over $19 million per year that year. On that contract. At this point, Coby White's contract would be even less than that. I get it, and I understand as Bulls fans and spending the last few years not taking advantage of assets. I don't, and this isn't to say that maybe AK and Eversley do look to maybe get crazy if they feel like they're getting a great deal back that nets them. Like, I won't say, for example, if the team is able to package their own first-round pick, if they keep it, with Coby White to move up and get Cooper Flagg, maybe they do something like that, right? But to say that the Bulls just off the rip need to be looking to trade Coby White right now is just a narrative that I can't get behind. And it's one that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're a team that's trying to find talent, to send out your young talent that's developing, that is on a cost-effective deal. This isn't a Zach LaVine situation. This isn't a situation where Coby White is getting paid more than what he deserves. He's underpaid, and because of you locking him into that, he's going to be underpaid for the foreseeable future. And also, let me say this. Even if you get to the point of Coby White reaching free agency, unrestricted free agency in 2 more years, because he has this year and next year, he's still under contract. So at the end of next season that he gets into, or the season after next, at the end of that, he gets to the point of being a free agent. The Bulls are going to be able, because of his contract being so low, the Bulls are going to be able to offer him so much more money than what anybody else is. And then that is, even if Coby White looks at the Bulls and say, y'all idiots, I'm out, that puts you in a situation where you're able to get a sign and trade deal done, because his contract already it's only going to be $17.92 million with the Chicago Bulls. That means that it's going to $17.92 million with the Bulls. So that means that any other team isn't going to even be able to offer him that much. That's how you maintain assets. Yeah, you won't necessarily get enough back, and the Bulls do have to do their due diligence next season during not this upcoming season, the season after, and ask themselves, do they feel confident they're going to be able to lock Coby White into a contract extension? Because if they don't, that's maybe when you start looking to pivot. If things like that, if you start getting that feel and inclination from that player. We haven't seen anything like that. So I'm operating off the mindset that that hasn't been something that it seems like is going to happen. But this whole thought process between Alex Johnson and some of the Bulls fans that think we need to move on from Coby just because he isn't a superstar or star level player yet is asinine, in my opinion, because that your team isn't just built off that. And if you live in a place where you're constantly moving off players just because they aren't a star level player, that's where you get into a place that by the time you find your star, you're then having to spend the next 3 years after getting that star to build a team around them. And that is something that you can avoid. Again, not every team is able to avoid that, but if you have the opportunity to, you try to avoid that where you can. If the Bulls do, if and when, let's hope that it's when, not if, the Bulls do eventually draft or obtain a star-level player, you want players around that are going to fit their roles, and it's not the same as the Zach LaVine situation. So many people go to comparing Zach LaVine's situation to Coby White to if you give him a deal, and it's not the same because, again, as I said, with Zach LaVine's second contract, he was making over $19 million per year. Coby White is on his second contract now, making $12. Coby White's, when he's in the similar situation as Zach LaVine, when he finally needs his long-term big money, that's still going to be a sub-$20 million contract at a time where that may be almost mid-level exception type money. That's the place that you sit in and the ability that you have, and you cannot give that up just because of the look of a player not necessarily being a star level player. That's in my opinion. You guys can let me know what you guys think down below, but I saw that article and immediately it got my wheels to turning on, okay, how much of this makes sense, right? And like I've said, you don't have to agree to understand. I don't agree with the thought process of moving on from Coby because of he's just not a star level player, or Ayo for that matter. I can understand where some of it is rooted in when you look at the assets you can get back, their value being at an all-time high, those type of things. But at some point, it's players that you want to keep. And I think that people are projecting the thought process between the team that we're moving away from the young players we still have on this team. The problem wasn't just because of Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine that you just didn't strike where their value was hottest. It was the fact that those are players that were coming out of their primes and on deals that you were going to eventually have to pay them too much money to be able to keep them. It's not the same situation. Zach LaVine is not the same situation as Coby because of where that contract sits, and that's something that I wanted to spend my time with on this platform, talking a little bit about, just because I see a lot of narratives happen, and it was a small portion of the community. It wasn't like a ton of Bulls fans were saying this, but I wanted to spend some time kind of debunking a little bit of that narrative. You guys can go and check out the article from Alex Johnson. I'll try to have it in the description on both the podcast side and the YouTube side so you guys can go and read it for yourself. Like I said, he lays out his thoughts very well here, but I just don't agree with the basis of the thought process in moving Coby. Now, if the Bulls come to the place where they are deciding to move on from Coby, a lot of the thought processes he has there are decent. But again, just kind of my mindset. You guys can let me know what you guys think on that down below. Next up, I want to talk about the story around the Bulls, and that's Matas Buxzelis. And that is a guy who is right now, he's the third leading scorer in Summer League, averaging over 20 points per game, 2 blocks per game as well. He's playing pretty solidly. We know that he's scoring, he's showing a lot of things. But that has led me now to want to talk about what is Matas's role going into next season. And with Zach LaVine still being on this roster, more than likely still on the roster now, it has kind of made that a little bit more straightforward, right? At least in my opinion. Because Zach LaVine is going to start if he's on the Chicago Bulls roster. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. There's some things that are just true. Josh Giddey will be the starting point guard. See a lot of you guys trying to come up with ways where he's not. He's going to be the starting point guard next year. The Bulls, in a situation that they've put themselves in of needing to decide on the contract extension with Josh Giddey next season, he's going to start. So that has led it to now of saying that Buzelis' kind of natural position right now being the 3, that's going to be taken up by Zach LaVine, a player that the Bulls want to move on from, but unfortunately can't right now via what the market is dictating. And then Patrick Williams is going to be at the 4 because he's a bigger player right now at that 4 position. He has the NBA weight. Matas Buxzelis to me, or Matas Buxzelis, I'm still adjusting my brain to saying it correctly. Matas Buxzelis, he needs to put on weight before he's even ready to really even attempt to guard 4s. And I think that's going to take a year or 2 to get to the point. So right there, he's probably not starting, even though I do think had the Bulls been able to move on from LaVine, Matas probably would be starting at that 3 position next to Patrick Williams. I kind of like that duality between those two. They cover up each other's weaknesses and strengths pretty well, right? So that means that now you're relegating Buzelis to the bench, which is fine as a developing rookie, but how many minutes does he play? I think that it's fair to say that Buzelis has passed up Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, probably even Torrey Craig on the depth chart so far for players that are going to play that wing position, right? That's going to happen. And so because of that, it's like, okay, how many minutes now do you play? And what is his role in the offseason? Do you run a lot of plays for him? Do you use his ability to, move without the ball to kind of naturally get in plays, kind of similar to what you do with Patrick Williams, but he's a much more aggressive player. He's not going to pass up as many shots. And that's the key balance that the Bulls are going to have to fit when it comes to Buzelis is how much of the load pause? How much of a role do you want to give him in your offense as far as running plays for him? Now, I do think that Buzelis, with his natural skill set, could thrive as a player that doesn't necessarily have to play a bunch of minutes. Have to have a lot of plays called for him. But I hope to see a difference in Billy Donovan and how he used Patrick Williams and kind of a mix between the usage of Patrick Williams and Ayo Dosunmu. Ayo got plays ran for him, right? And that was because he was a point guard, then he was the shooting guard, things like that. I want to see a combination of that. Use some of Buzelis' natural off-ball movement and skill set But also, we've seen Buzelis in his dribble. His handles are good, right? And so there's an ability that he has to get to the mid-range, hit floaters, get to the rim that I also want to see. And I think you have to maximize the talent that's out there with Buzelis, regardless of it, because you want to see what you have in this kid. And fortunately enough, the Bulls have players that naturally are going to fit that. Josh Giddey is a player that I'm going to love to see on a fast break with Buzelis. There's no questions about that. Matas is the type of player that pairs well with Josh Giddey, even though they both having their struggle shooting threes right now. Ayo Dosunmu is another player. Ayo Dosunmu was a one-man fast break a lot of times for the Chicago Bulls, and he was basically one of our best players in transition in the open court. You pair Buzelis with that, with his ability to cut, slash, and get to the rim and operate in space. I like that a whole lot for him as well. So I think that putting Buzelis in the right lineups as well is going to be a big part of that. Now, some Bulls fans are naturally going to have their concerns in that in a Billy Donovan offense who hasn't always necessarily ran the best situations for players. So that's something that goes into it as well that you can't deny or overlook. And I understand that concern there with Billy Donovan and how he uses his lineups and sometimes how he doesn't use players to the best of their strengths. But to me, what Buzelis has shown more than anything, regardless of how you break down the individual aspects of his game in basketball, he has shown that he's somebody who does deserve, not just because of where they were drafted at, but because his play and how that play can make it easier for certain aspects of what the Bulls are trying to do. He deserves to get minutes next season. And so I do think that next season, if Buzelis can get around 20 minutes per game, that's a perfect spot for him, especially with Zach LaVine still on the roster. If the Bulls are able to move on from Zach LaVine at some point next season, then that role is going to increase. Now, it's also up to Buzelis to show and earn and show that he keeps deserving those minutes. I really don't have a concern of that right now, but for anybody that does has a concern of that, I can understand it's a rookie. Rookies can be up and down. And then also that rookie wall, right, that's going to hit at some point in the season that people are also concerned about. But like I said, when you look at the depth chart here for the Bulls, outside of the players that are starting, I have the Bulls starting five right now as Giddey, Coby White, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, Nikola Vucevic as your 1 through 5. And then kind of your first players off the bench. Ayo Dosunmu has shown that he deserves to be one of the first players off the bench for the Chicago Bulls. No question about that. Jalen Smith, because he's the only other big we really have on this roster, as Adama Sanogo is on a 2-way contract. And then to me, I'm looking at it, and it's Matas Buxzelis is right there up with it. I know some fans want to see Chris Duarte, Dalen Terry, and I understand that. But I think Buxzelis has put himself right there, especially as a player that can play multiple roles. Hell, he's even played some shooting guard in Summer League. I think with that, he's shown himself to be able to be as versatile as you need him to make sure you get him in your lineup in multiple situations. And that's what I hope to see for Matas in his rookie year. But one of the players that I mentioned that, to me, Buzelis has passed up on the depth chart is Julian Phillips. But I also want to talk about Julian Phillips. Julian Phillips actually talked a lot about things in his return from injury, and he said this: I feel like I'm back to normal. I feel good with it. Just got to keep bringing the energy on both sides of the ball. Got to keep defending like I do. Got to be able to knock down open shots, read different closeouts. Just find a way to impact the game positively by those things. And if we do that high level, I'll have an opportunity to showcase that. We do have a lot of young guys, and that's exciting because some of us have been around each other over the last year, and it'll be exciting to see what we'll be able to do. And so, listen, that is something that is good to hear that Julian Phillips understands, right? Sorry. It's good to hear that Julian Phillips understands that in the Bulls moving to a younger team, that it has opened up the opportunities, and their chemistry may be the thing that really makes this easier for all of them. Having that moment of young players that have grown and developed together, that's what you want when you're going through a rebuild. That's what you want when you're building a team overall, is you want players that are going to grow and develop together. And what I've taken from what Julian Phillips has said is that the young guys on this team have a relationship. The young guys of this team are building that continuity, that's a buzzword, and chemistry with each other. But you got to look, you brought in a 21 about to be 22-year-old point guard. You have a 22 about to be 23-year-old Patrick Williams. You got Julian Phillips, who's about to be 21, I think, as well. You got Dalen Terry, who's still a young player. You got a lot of these players. You're adding in Matas Buxzelis to that as well. I'm not saying that all these guys are going to end up panning out for the Bulls, because there's a chance that they may not, right? Not all of these guys are going to end up turning out to be long-term options for the Bulls. If they do, shout out to the Bulls if they're able to do that. But in having these young guys who have been around, who have been here, and that they grow that chemistry together, that's what you're looking for in your rebuild to tell you who's going to stay and who's going to go. And hopefully AK and Eversley do a better job at evaluating that than what they did with some of the young players before. Now, for what it said, Julian Phillips also talked about the absence of DeMar DeRozan. He said this: his presence is felt every day. His professionalism was felt at a very high level. After just seeing it, it kind of tells you the player he really is and why he's the man he is. The different things he preaches and believes in. Just being under him for the last year was really special for me just to see it up close and personal, so he'll be missed. I've said multiple times over the history of this show that the lessons that these young players learn from DeMar DeRozan are going to be things that carry out through the rest of their career. And while DeMar is gone, right, I can't wait to see how the work ethic, the things that they've learned from him play into these players now taking on bigger roles. I do think that Julian Phillips doesn't have as clear of a straight path, right? And I do think his energy, his defense, his hustle, especially for a team that lost Alex Caruso, that lost Javonte Green, they could be looking for that. That is why part of the reason why Matas Buxzelis is such a good pick for the Bulls, because he's bringing a lot of that. But I do think look out for Julian Phillips and how he continues to develop over this second year in the NBA for the Chicago Bulls. And the head coach of the Summer League Bulls, Billy Donovan III, has already talked about Julian Phillips and his ability to hit an open shot, the fact that he doesn't hesitate, hit an open shot, the fact that that is something that was coming in when he came into playing into the NBA, is will he hit those open shots? And now Julian Phillips is going to be given an opportunity in training camp and throughout his play in Summer League to show that he has earned and deserved a role for this Chicago Bulls team. But we'll watch it, and I hope that for one, he does show up. But let me know what you guys think on all that down below. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. We are almost at our goal of 20,000 subscribers. We're about 470 subscribers away from getting to that 20,000 subscriber mark. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed. In exchange of that, I'll be delivering the best daily content for the Chicago Bulls that you'll find on all of YouTube. But make sure you guys are following the show. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. That's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.